In the forests of Mill City, Sheriff Jake, his ex-wife Emma and their friend Wyatt are desperately fleeing from what appears to be a monster. They find an abandoned warehouse and hide inside, but the creature, which turns out to be a skeleton velociraptor, breaks in and tries to attack them. The day before this incident, the sheriff receives a complaint from Professor Keller about a group of rebels invading his property. This group is led by Dakota, the sheriff's brother, who has organized a rebellion against the professor's corrupt practices. According to Dakota, the man offered him money to buy the villagers' land in order to expand his business. However, in addition to the below-market value, Professor Keller intends to bring down several local businesses, including the Museum for the Preservation of Native Culture. In the midst of the confusion, the sheriff goes to talk to Dakota and asks everyone to return to their homes, while he tries to resolve the matter with the professor. After that, he goes to his ex-wife's house to see their daughter Savannah, but all he finds is a note from the girl, saying she went to the library to study. However, the sheriff learns that Savannah has actually gone to the university party with her boyfriend Matt, and decides to pay a surprise visit. Elsewhere in town, Professor Keller presents his guests with a model showing the future buildings of Mill City. Shortly afterwards, he calls in his archaeology expert, none other than Emma, for whom Keller has a greater interest than just business. While the two of them are talking, Jake has just arrived at the university, and as well as ordering Savannah into the car, he tells everyone that the party is over. Shortly afterwards, Jake takes Savannah to Professor Keller's party and calls Emma to talk about the girl sneaking out. Despite the end of their relationship, the couple still have unresolved issues and don't know how to deal with their teenage daughter. Far away, Dakota returns to his museum, still furious that his people's land will be used for commercial purposes. His anger reaches its limit and he begins to destroy all the pieces in the museum, until he sees a book in the display case, with a drawing of a leaf on the cover. After reading the book, Dakota decides to go to the lower floor of the museum, which is surrounded by dinosaur skeletons. There he opens the book and, using other native artifacts, begins a kind of ritual, which for some reason also affects Savannah, who is asleep in her room. Because of the blood bond, the girl also has a strong connection with the native people and they both enter a state of hypnosis. Finally, as soon as the ritual is completed, Dakota realizes that something has gone wrong and tries to escape from the museum in his tractor. However, he is startled to hear a roar coming from the sky, and when he looks up he sees a flying monster breaking through the clouds. Nearby, Wyatt is resting in his trailer, looking after his little dog Spark, when he hears Dakota's voice, running away. He doesn't understand what's going on, until suddenly, something pushes the trailer and causes it to overturn. After recovering from the blow, Wyatt rushes away from the trailer, only to come across the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, roaring towards him. The next morning, Sheriff Jake receives a call from his colleague, Officer Dale, saying that someone has stolen the dinosaurs from the museum. When he gets there, there's no sign of Wyatt or Dakota, and the place looks like it's been destroyed by a tractor, but there are no wheel marks around it. The sheriff then has the area cordoned off for investigation, without noticing that there is a huge dinosaur footprint on the ground. Meanwhile, Savannah apologizes to Emma for lying about the party and asks her permission to go to another university event with her boyfriend. Although Jake has grounded the girl, Emma allows her to go, as long as she doesn't lie again. The girl thanks her and heads off to meet Matt, while her mother goes to meet the archaeology students to explore the city in search of historical artifacts. Two of the students, Brian and Melissa, are searching the forest when they hear a noise coming from above. The girl gets scared and tries to leave, but when she calls Brian to come along, her colleague mysteriously disappears. Melissa gets scared and calls for her colleague, without realizing that behind her appears the skeleton of a pterodactyl. Seeing the creature, the girl runs to save herself, but is captured by the flying dinosaur, which knocks her to the ground with its claws. Shortly afterwards, the students in the class return to talk to Emma, except for Brian and Melissa. The teacher thinks they're taking too long, and fearing that something has happened, Emma calls Jake for his help. Although he's busy with the theft case at the museum, the sheriff decides to go there to investigate the disappearance of the two students. In another part of the forest, Wyatt appears hiding in one of the bushes, but he doesn't know where his little dog has ended up and fears that the dinosaur has devoured him. He then sets off to call for help, until he sees Dakota riding on the back of a horse and calls out to him, but he doesn't answer. Wyatt runs towards him to see what has happened, but comes across a skeletal velociraptor and is forced to flee towards the road. On the way, Wyatt comes across a herd of cows and tries to hide among them, but the man ends up falling into the waste. To make matters worse, the velociraptor tries to attack him, but before it can, the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton pushes him away and then devours one of the cows in the herd. Meanwhile, in the forest, Emma goes to look for the students again, but all she finds is Brian's body, hanging from the trees. As soon as the sheriff arrives, he notices that all around the ground are strange footprints, which appear to be those of birds, but at a much larger size. Emma has no idea what it is, and everything only gets worse when her assistant calls her saying that she has found Melissa. Unfortunately, it's too late and the girl is lying lifeless on the floor, with a wound on her body. Seeing that the situation is more serious than he thought, the sheriff orders the entire forest to be sealed off. In addition, Emma confesses that despite Jake's punishment, she let Savannah go out with her boyfriend and they need to find their daughter before something happens. Meanwhile, Savannah is enjoying the moment with Matt in the middle of the lake, until one of the senior students calls all the freshmen back. To his misfortune, the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton appears on the scene and the freshmen run for their lives, while the senior is devoured by the creature. The Tyrannosaurus Rex then sees Savannah and Matt swimming in the lake and sets out to attack them. Fortunately, the young couple manage to hide underwater and swim back to land, hiding among the rocks. The two hear the screams of their colleagues and Matt decides to go to the campsite to get Savannah's clothes. He then rushes off with his girlfriend, but ends up leaving her cell phone on the floor of the campsite. Seconds later, Sheriff Jake and Emma arrive at the scene of the party, where they find the body of the veteran student, already lifeless. Everything only gets stranger when Emma sees another huge footprint on the ground and notices that the students have been knocked out and bitten several times. The two of them try to figure out what's going on, at the same time that Savannah and Matt are fleeing down the road. The girl decides to call her father and tell him everything that has happened, but both she and Matt have left their cell phones by the lake. The two make their way back to town, when they meet Dakota, coming out of the woods on his horse. Savannah asks her uncle what happened, but the guy has pale eyes, as if he's still hypnotized. Savannah tells Matt that according to the native culture, Dakota is communicating with the spirit world, but when she calls for her uncle, he comes back to reality and Savannah asks him to tell her what's happening to the town. At the same time, Sheriff Jake and Emma set off in their vehicle, with the archaeologist believing that the whole thing was caused by a prehistoric animal. Jake thinks it's crazy, but Emma insists that no known animal would make a footprint of that size. Suddenly, the two stop the car when they see Wyatt in the middle of the road, and the guy is happy to see them again. He tells them that because he had fallen on cow droppings, his stench served to drive away the creature that was chasing him. The sheriff asks what the creature is, but the three of them hear another roar coming from the forest and Wyatt tells them all to get out of there. Jake tries to start the vehicle, but the engine is faulty, and soon afterwards the skeletal velociraptor appears and jumps on top of the vehicle. The creature then uses its claws to destroy the roof, but the sheriff pulls out his gun and shoots the dinosaur. Finally, Jake manages to accelerate the car and the three of them escape, but Emma is astonished to see a live dinosaur before her eyes. However, the velociraptor continues to pursue them, so Jake decides to put an end to the monster in another way. He brakes the car abruptly and makes a turn, coming face to face with the skeleton, which is undeterred and advances towards the group. Jake responds by accelerating the car and crashing into the velociraptor skeleton, which breaks into several pieces. Believing they are out of danger, the trio get out of the car, but soon the bones begin to rebuild and the skeletal velociraptor comes back to life. The sheriff sends Emma and Wyatt fleeing into the woods, arriving at the present time, when the three of them hide in the old warehouse. Inside, as soon as Wyatt and Emma climb the stairs, Jake lets the velociraptor in and tries to face it alone. The creature leaps towards him, but the sheriff dodges the attack and climbs up the ladder, closing the gate immediately afterwards. His plan was to leave the dinosaur trapped, and now the trio leave through another door, making sure the monster can't escape. In the meantime, Dakota finishes telling Savannah and Matt what happened, revealing that he had performed a ritual to ask his ancestors for help. His plan was to use their magic to protect Professor Keller's land, but instead the spirits took the form of the museum's skeletons. As a result, the creatures have come back to life and are attacking the town, and Dakota doesn't know how to reverse the spell. Regretting what he's done, he thinks it's best for everyone to flee while there's still time, but Savannah refuses, as people are being wiped out by the dinosaurs. She then asks her uncle to find another solution, or her family's entire legacy will be tarnished by this mistake. Thanks to his niece's motivation, Dakota remembers the book he used called The Burnt Leaf, written by his ancestors, and which may hold the key to reversing the spell. The three of them set off to find the book in the museum, just as Sheriff Jake and the others leave the old warehouse. Afterwards, Jake calls the Army Reserve officers, asking for heavy weaponry to combat a threat in Mill City. Even though he doesn't know what it's about, the corporal agrees and the two arrange to meet at the university stadium. Minutes later, Dakota, Matt and Savannah arrive at the museum and start looking for the Book of the Burning Leaf. At that moment, Dakota sees something moving inside a tent and fears it's another one of the dinosaurs. The three of them go to see what it is, but are surprised when Spark, Wyatt's little dog, comes out of the tent after almost being devoured by the Tyrannosaurus. Savannah is relieved to see him and continues her search for the Book of the Burning Leaf. Nearby, Professor Keller is at the university, giving a lecture to his investors, when he receives a call from Emma. She tells him to get everyone out of there as soon as possible, because a monster is heading towards the city. However, Keller thinks this is crazy and hangs up, as he's been waiting a long time for the funding, and continues with the presentation. Finally, at the museum, Dakota finds the book, and when he reads one of the pages, he sees a passage talking about spirits being driven away by fire from the heavens. Savannah interprets this as a way of invoking a powerful storm, capable of destroying the dinosaurs with lightning. Now they have to find a spell that will do it, but they have to hurry, because the skeletal pterodactyl has just arrived at the university. Keller and the other guests panic and flee, just as Lance Corporal appears with his team, armed with rocket launchers. However, the men are startled to see the Tyrannosaurus Rex on the scene, and without even trying to pull the trigger, they decide to retreat. In the middle of the confusion, Keller calls Emma again, saying that 2 dinosaur skeletons are attacking the university. Luckily for him, she has just arrived in the car and tells the professor to get in as soon as possible. The Tyrannosaurus sees the group trying to escape and gets in the way, but Sheriff Jake waits for the right moment, and as soon as he finds a gap, he reverses the car and manages to dodge the monster. After that, the 4 of them enter the college, where Jake meets Corporal Lance and asks what their biggest weapon is. The group then show off their rocket launchers, and the sheriff summons 2 volunteers to take on the skeletal dinosaurs. Outside, Wyatt sees a lost boy, who was with his mother at the performance, but ended up getting separated from her. Fearing that the monster will return, Wyatt takes the boy inside, when the 2 are surprised by the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The creature approaches quickly, but luckily the 2 hide inside a dumpster and go unnoticed by the Tyrannosaurus. As soon as the 2 enter the college, Jake and the soldiers position themselves outside, waiting for the Tyrannosaurus and the pterodactyl to appear. Seconds later, the monsters appear on the scene, and at the sheriff's command, the trio fire rocket launcher shots at them. Thanks to the explosion, the creatures are destroyed, but as with the Velociraptor, they begin to regenerate. If that wasn't bad enough, the 2 skeletons unite into one creature, forming a Tyrannosaurus with wings. The sheriff orders the soldiers to enter the university, but it's too late and they are captured and devoured by the dinosaur. Jake soon realizes that guns won't be enough to destroy the dinos and asks for more reinforcements, while he thinks of a solution. Shortly afterwards, the sheriff receives a call from Dakota, saying that he was responsible for all this, but that he has found a way to resolve the situation. He then recounts the passage in the Book of the Burnt Leaf, with a spell capable of summoning a storm and eliminating the monsters through the power of lightning. As expected, Jake doesn't believe any of it, but Dakota insists that he will solve everything and passes the call on to Savannah. The sheriff is relieved to hear that his daughter is okay, but the girl asks her father to have faith in his brother, because he is the only one capable of eliminating the dinosaurs. Jake continues to think this is silly and sets off to find his daughter in the museum with Wyatt. What Jake doesn't realize is that in the old warehouse, the Velociraptor manages to force the door and escapes. Emma is worried about what might happen to Jake and Savannah, and decides to go to the museum, with Professor Keller insisting that she go along. Before arriving at the museum, the trio perform the ritual from the book, and shortly afterwards, the 3 of them hear the sound of thunder outside. Everything indicates that the ritual has worked, and soon a strong storm begins in the city. At the same time, Dakota is taken over by the spirits of the ancestors and continues with the ritual in the middle of the city. Soon, lightning starts to strike everywhere, and this attracts the flying dinosaur, which threatens to attack the trio. Nearby, Agent Dale appears, and on seeing the monster he rushes to help Savannah and the others. However, he is struck by the creature's tail, which throws him into a power cable, electrocuting Agent Dale. After claiming one more victim, the creature advances towards the group, and with a headbutt, throws Dakota away. The monster then tries to attack Savannah, but Matt gets in front of her and is thrown into an iron grate. The girl tries to help him, but Matt asks her to flee and Savannah runs into the field, where she comes across her father's car. Fortunately, the dinosaur leaves and Savannah calls her father to help Dakota and Matt, who are seriously injured. Jake and Wyatt take the 2 into the museum, but Dakota can barely stand up and won't be able to continue the ritual. He then asks his brother to sort it out, because even if he doesn't believe in native rituals, it takes faith in the power of the ancestors to fight this threat. Seconds later, Emma and Keller arrive at the scene and Savannah updates them on the situation, telling them that they need to summon a storm through the ritual. The sheriff knows he won't be able to do it, but he has the idea of producing an even more powerful electrical discharge, using the town's power station. Savannah agrees and says that she will do the ritual in Dakota's place, as she was the only one to see how it is performed. The sheriff disagrees, as he doesn't want to put his daughter at risk, but the girl asks her father to trust her for once. With no other choice, Jake agrees, so he calls Wyatt to come along, as he's worked at the station and knows how to work the generator. Emma also goes along, but she asks Professor Keller to stay and look after the wounded, even against his will. Finally, the group arrives at the power station and Wyatt prepares the power cables for the arrival of the dinosaurs. With everything ready, Emma asks her daughter to be careful and asks the same of Sheriff Jake, who is surprised by his ex-wife's concern. Finally, the couple reconcile with a kiss and everyone goes to their posts to end the Triassic threat once and for all. Some time passes and the flying dinosaur appears among the clouds, with Savannah initiating the ritual, with the help of her father. Just as before, a heavy thunderstorm breaks out and all that remains is to wait for the dinosaur to approach the station to start the generator. However, in the middle of the ritual, the creature advances to attack Savannah, but Jake jumps towards his daughter, saving her life. Savannah is fine, but the monster has broken one of the power cables and Wyatt is unable to start the generator. He then manages to connect the broken cable with his hands and tells Savannah to start the generator at his signal. Jake lures the monster to give the group time, and as soon as the cable is connected, Savannah activates the generator, producing a powerful electrical discharge. With all this power unleashed, the dinosaur can't stand it and is completely destroyed, unable to regenerate. The battle is finally over and Emma reunites with her family, happy that everyone is okay. The sheriff congratulates Wyatt on his efforts, but the man collapses, having survived an electric shock. Unfortunately, the celebration is interrupted when the velociraptor reappears at the station and sets out to attack Emma. She then lures it into the station, but as Wyatt is unconscious, Jake decides to splice the power cables himself so that Savannah can activate the generator once again. As soon as the creature falls into the trap, the girl activates the command and generates another electrical discharge, eliminating the last skeletal dinosaur. With that, Jake and Emma, who were thrown to the ground by the energy blast, hold each other's hands, certain that they have saved the city. A few days later, Professor Keller, with Dakota's help, decides to use the money from the land purchase to finance the Native Museum. Everyone gathers for the grand reopening and Savannah is applauded for her courage, which makes her parents, now back together, very proud. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.